Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about brushes, and it's just going to be kind of a general, why would you choose this brush over that brush, and kind of like how brushes themselves work. Let me know if you want more specific videos, like I could do one a little more in depth just on face brushes, just on eye brushes, and kind of show you even how they work. But this is where we're starting. See if you guys are interested in like this type of video. So we'll start out with just talking about the brush itself. So I learned a lot about brushes, not just for makeup, but I also have a fine arts degree, so that's how I learned a lot about brushes, and then I learned more specific things about brushes as I got more into makeup. So your brush, you have your handle, your ferrule, and then you have the bristles. The important thing when you are washing your brushes is to always point it downwards when it's wet, or keep it exactly perpendicular or at a slight angle, because your ferrule is where basically the handle is glued on and where the bristles are glued on, and so don't get any water in there. So that's basically your brush anatomy. So now we're going to talk more about like bristles and whatnot, and I have a couple different, I actually have a ton of brushes right down here, and so we'll kind of talk about different types and just this quick overview. And again, let me know in the down box below if you want something a little more in depth. So the first thing we're going to talk about is face brushes, and we're going to talk about like Kabuki style face brushes first. So I'm not going to pull out like all of my brushes, but these are some of the brushes I use the most that are that kind of Kabuki style. So we're going to talk a little bit about what does that style mean and what's kind of the differences, and then I also have I have 4 that are synthetic, and I have 1 that is natural, and we'll talk about that difference too. So starting off with these brushes, Kabuki style brushes are dense and they're used to buff in. So the thing to know about the difference between brushes that are something that is very thin, and sparse and fluffy, like a stippling brush, or even more so, like a powder brush that's like really flimsy, versus something that's more dense and has a lot more give than a Kabuki brush. The Kabuki style brush is very dense, and you can kind of feel that resistance on your fingers. So that's going to mean the denser, the more product it's going to pick up at a time. So like if you're applying something with a powder brush, you're going to apply a lot less than something that's dense, like a Kabuki brush. Kabuki brushes are normally used for foundation. They can also be used for concealer or like a cream contour. So you got a couple options. Kabuki brushes are normally used, you buff it into the skin. And the reason you would do that is mineral foundations, you really want to get it warmed up on the skin, so that's why you buff in something like that. Also, it's going to give you a little of a lighter coverage than using something like a powder brush, which we'll talk about next. So if you're using this and you're buffing into the skin, you're going to get a slightly lighter coverage, even if you have something that's like a medium coverage foundation. And it's also going to depend, obviously, how much product you use. But typically that would be the case because you're buffing into the skin rather than using like a beauty blender or a paddle brush that you can like layer more, especially when you're talking about something that's a buildable type of foundation. So Kabuki brushes are great for mineral foundations as well as to buff something in if you like a much more natural look. It also works really well with even like lighter to medium foundations, and you use just a really little product and really work it into the skin, and you can get a very natural looking finish. So we'll quickly talk about synthetic versus natural. This is going to be true for all of the brushes that we talk about. Doesn't really matter the style. Things that are synthetic are non-porous, so they are going to be easier to clean, and they're also going to deposit more product. Things that are natural are going to pick up more of the product into the actual bristles because they are porous. So a lot of times when you're using cream products, you might want to go for a synthetic because it's going to be easier to wash. It's also going to deposit more in your face. So if you were going to use something natural, it's going to pick up some of that product and keep it in the bristles. So that's why it works really well for blending or for lighter applications, but it is going to keep some of your product versus something that's all synthetic. Of these, my most used is probably the Sigma F80, the flat top Kabuki. That's the one I like best because it's the easiest one to clean, and Kabuki brushes are already kind of a pain because they are super dense. So quickly talk about a paddle brush. All the paddle brushes I own are synthetic. I do not have a natural one. I'm not sure if they make them. I just don't own one. All of mine are synthetic. Paddle brushes, the way you want to apply it is like it's like a paintbrush. The best way to do it is like crosshatch motions, And because you're doing light layers, you can really build up product. So this works really well if you want a little more of a full coverage. People have been asking me on my Instagram, like what I've been doing different with my skin. I haven't changed up my foundation, still wearing the same one, but I'm not buffing it in every day. Sometimes I want a little more full coverage, and so I'm actually just applying it with a paddle brush, and you can let a thin layer dry and then even go over with a second one. So the paddle brushes are great for basically just kind of lightly brushing onto your skin. It's going to work better. Kabuki brushes, because you are buffing it into the skin, it can kind of micro exfoliate, so people with drier skin might not have as good of luck with that, so you might want to opt for a paddle brush. Paddle brush is also great for buildable foundations when you want a little more coverage. It also works well for just applying, a lot of times with MAC face and body, that's something that I only use my fingers with, but I will apply it to the face with one of this just to kind of get an even amount, and then I'll work it in with my fingers. So we'll talk a little bit about angled. I obviously have two different ones. I have one that's Kabuki style, and then I have one that's more of a like brush. These are things that I use for contour. The other brushes I use for contour are these two. So this is a synthetic fan brush, and then I have a natural haired like little just domed brush. So with these, obviously you're gonna get something different. These two are synthetic, so they're going to be easier for me to spread product around, and they work really well when I'm using cream contours, and these are pretty much what I use. Both of these are semi-dense. This one is obviously less dense than this one. You can even see these are very tightly packed, and they're very close, so you don't have a lot of give, especially down here, so you can really get exactly where you want it, because these bristles don't really move, while this one you can see there's a lot more give to this, so this is going to work a little better for blending when this can apply a little bit better, or this I can also just keep in very specific spots, versus this I can do a lot more like forehead work and then just the cheekbones, because it's a lot fluffier, it's just easier to work with. They're both synthetic, so they are again going to deposit more product and then something that is natural hair. These ones I use basically for powder products only. So this is my favorite one for contouring. It's the Chiseler by Hair and Makeup Addiction, and it can just really get in there, and because it works well and it's natural, it's able to basically pick some things up. So if I'm going like this trying to blend in, it's going to pick a little bit of the product up as it kind of deposits and moves around the product. So it's really easy to blend things out with natural hair brushes. Again, this is something I don't usually use for contour, but a lot of times I use it clean over a contour or a blush, because I'm going to use it to blend, because again, it's a natural hair brush. It's going to pick up a little bit as you deposit at the same time, so it's really easy to blend with the natural hair brushes. Quickly talk about concealer brushes. All my concealer brushes are synthetic. Easiest way with concealer, obviously you're going to want to be basically dabbing it on, so you don't want to be picking up a lot of that product. You won't mostly just want to be applying, so I almost always go for just synthetic. You can go for ones that are like this and kind of get general areas. This also works really well if you want to use a cream highlight. This is like a line perfector, and so that works really well for like cleaning up liner or around your lips. And then there's also the Real Techniques, and this is the shading brush, and that works really well for like blending little areas under your eyes or your nose. So concealer brushes, I almost always go for synthetic, just because you're wanting to be depositing, and like most everyone uses a cream concealer. Again, if you use a mineral-based product, natural hairs tend to work best, because you're able to really work it into the brush before applying to the face. I don't use mineral concealers, so I don't have a natural hair concealer brush. So we'll talk quickly about stippling brushes, or dual fiber stippling brushes. So this one's a real stippling brush. You can see it has two different layers of fibers, so you're able to apply to this top layer, and then as you blend, you kind of touch into the bottom layer and to blend it out. So this works really well if you want a really light coverage of foundation, if maybe you're a little bit afraid of going into highly pigmented blush. I love duo fiber brushes for cream blushes. That is like the hardest thing to say. And so these work great for something like that, but it's where you can apply something to basically these top fibers, and then as you kind of like apply, you can stipple. And you can even just stipple and just do your whole application like that, but then you can also go in and blend, and it's going to start, you can see it can touch into those deeper fibers. So this is great for those cream blushes and even powder blushes as well. It also is great if you like a really light application of foundation. I have two different highlighting brushes. This is the tapered highlighter by Sigma, and this is the Hakuhodo B5521. So I have one that's synthetic and one that's natural hair. I really like the natural hair one if I really want to blend out my highlight and I don't want something extreme, or I'm actually using something a little more like Mary Luminize or something that's intense, because I'm able to kind of apply it and then blend it in really well. Because it's natural, it's going to pick up a little bit of that. This is the tapered highlighter by Sigma, which is synthetic. So if I really want either a very extreme highlight, a lot of the times if I'm doing like more of those kind of creative looks, I'll use this just because I can get it really extreme. Or if I'm using something like MAC Emphasize, but I want it to show up a little bit more, I'd use a synthetic one, because I'm able to basically apply it and apply a lot of it all kind of basically one fell swoop. These are kind of powder slash blush brushes all in one. Obviously duo fiber, basically going to be the same type of thing as what we talked about, the stippling brushes. You could use this to stipple, it's just a different shape. I also have the blusher brush by Hair and Makeup Addiction, and then I have the F30 by Sigma. So these are obviously ones for powder and ones for blush, but again, they can be used interchangeably. It's kind of up to you. The thing to, again, remember is just density. The reason was why these are ideal for powder and blush is that they are, like you can see, they're very fluffy. Again, the denser the brush, the more product it's going to pack on. So if I was going to use something like this to apply my blush, which I definitely have the time because I kind of like a lot of blush, it's going to apply a lot because it's just so dense. It's going to pick up so much product. But these, obviously, they're so fluffy, so they're going to just apply less product. So the fluffier the brush is, the less product's going to go on, which is why these are ideal for powder, like blush brushes. Again, powder blush brushes, I'm going to do a video on this. The best thing to do, obviously, is to press and roll your powder on to really set the makeup. And I only use powder brushes just to kind of dust off any excess. So again, I don't really want to be moving anything underneath. I just want to dust it. So this works really well because you can just kind of get in there and lightly take it off without really disturbing what's underneath it, because again, it's so light and fluffy. So we're going to talk really quickly about a couple different eye brushes. So in regards to packing color on, again, it's basically the same type of thing. You need a MAC, this 242 is a synthetic brush. The 239 is a natural hair brush. This works great for packing that on the lid color. This can too, obviously, but this is just going to deposit more color. This I can't blend as well with. It's also going to be really easy to clean if I'm going to use a cream shadow or something and use this to apply it. This is going to be harder to clean if I'm going to use a cream product, and it's also something I could also use to blend. And that's basically going to be all I'm saying with these. Obviously, these are ones that are going to fit in different areas of the eye. So something like this are both ones that I'll use a lot to deposit color in the crease. This is going to deposit more color because, again, it's natural versus synthetic. And then things like this, these synthetic, like large blending brushes, are going to more move the product. They won't suck, they won't basically like hold on to very much of it, versus natural hair blending brushes, which as you blend, they're going to also just grab onto a little bit. So if you're like, I don't have a lot of color on my lid and you just want to blend, you might want to use this. And then if you're like, oh, I'm having a really hard time blending, I might just also have too much product, go for something that's a little more of a natural hair. Natural hair brushes I find a lot easier to blend with. Lastly would be liner brushes, or like eyebrow if you use a cream product like I do. Synthetic brushes I like best because they're just the easiest to clean. They're also just going to apply that really easily because, again, they're not going to hold on to a lot of that product. They're just going to deposit it. So yeah, basically, all in all, natural hair brushes are porous, synthetic brushes are non-porous. Things that are denser hold on to more product and are going to pick up more product when you dip your brush in. Things that are lighter and fluffier are not going to pick up as much product. So that's pretty much the gist of all of that. And yeah, so that's kind of my overall about brushes. If you'd like more in-depth brushes, or maybe to see what kind of brushes I like to use on different parts of the face or with certain products, just let me know in the down box below. I hope you enjoyed this video. You can follow me on my other forms of social media. Those are in the down box below, as well as at the end of the video. And I hope to see you guys again soon.